Hey everybody, Nick here, and today we're going to do a little disassembly and maintenance on this little guy right here. This is the Protech Knives Magic, or Whiskers. One thing I want to highlight, though, before we get started here is that Protech's warranty is unfortunately kind of crappy in that they do not allow you to disassemble your own knife. You know, I can kind of... I don't know, at some level I can get it because they make automatic knives. Automatics are a little more complicated, but still. So doing what you're about to see me do here will void your warranty. But here I am, and why not? Let's give it a shot here. In the name of education or entertainment, whatever I qualify as. Hopefully a little of each. So this is an interesting knife in that it has this bolster lock flipping mechanism. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and disengage that right now. And the way that this works is that basically, and you can see this, this little bolster piece is connected via these two screws to this little lock bar in the back here. Because this knife is a conventional back lock at the end of the day. It's also got these two little reinforcing pins. But this little back lock is controlled by this little bolster, which can move up and down around the pivot here. The pivot is hidden underneath. So we've gone ahead and we can remove that little bolster lock area here, and I'll just stick that up in the top here, so that way I don't have to play with it anymore. I've got the blade out there right now because that will result in a little bit less spring tension. That's interesting. So the screws for the bolster there were 1/16 inch hex. Let's try 5/64. There you go. Yep. Using a different screw size down here at the bottom, which is odd, but whatever. Pop this guy loose. Pop this little guy loose. So there is spring tension involved, so you need to be careful as you're doing this. I am probably not being careful enough, but I'm wearing safety glasses, and I've disassembled a Protech or two, so I think I'm okay. But you do need to absolutely be cautious about this. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, you can see. So this is interesting. I'm seeing remnants of what looks to be a red thread locker, which generally implies permanence, but this is coming loose like nobody's business. So I don't know what's up with that. Maybe it's just bad thread locker or something. One other thing to note is that there are two different screw lengths here. The one up top here is much shorter than the bottom one down here. So you need to keep that in mind as you're putting this guy back together. More specifically, I need to keep that in mind as I'm putting this back together. Another thing to note, as I'm noting other things here, is that this guy actually came to me with a fair amount of blade play. When I first got this knife, there was side-to-side blade play as it deployed. And so I did a partial disassembly. I took it down to the extent that I removed this piece, then just tightened the pivot a little bit, and that resolved it. But still, that's something to keep in mind. I've now removed the pivot, and we're now going to pop this guy loose a little bit. What I'm doing is very carefully here, just going to lift this. Oh, that was easy enough. And so we can actually see that this is a pretty straightforward backlock. It's just got a little bit of a hidden treasure underneath there. So just taking you through, here is an aluminum plate, which is holding the backlock spring. This entire thing is a backlock mechanism here. Although, unlike most backlocks, this guy lifts from the front, generally, rather than you pushing down in the back here to lift it up. But that's how the locking mechanism itself works. When you lift this up, the knife is able to fire and pop out of there. Unlike most backlocks, though, it locks in the front, so you need to unlock it to open it and unlock it to close it. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is lift this blade off. Am I? Yeah, I am. So I know that there is a captive little spring underneath there, and so when I lift this off, there's going to be a little bit of a click as that spring disengages. There we go. And there is the spring. And you can see it is just actually a little spring here, and it mounts inside the blade here. This little hole grabs this little pokey at the end of the spring there. Pokey, that's the technical term, of course. And there we go. The knife is now fully disassembled. That's how it works. And then the bottom part of this spring then falls into this little part of the tongue of the spring, goes into this groove. Case closed, problem solved. Now the knife is fully disassembled and we can take it the rest of the way apart. So I'm going to go ahead and use some 91% isopropyl rubbing alcohol over here. And I'm just going to wipe down the various parts. One thing that's kind of interesting is that Protech does not use any kind of internal washer. These knives are running against the liner, well, not the liner, the scales of the knife themselves. And the scales appear to be some kind of an aluminum or something along those lines with this DLC coating. And if this is in fact DLC tends to reduce friction anyways, so it's fine. It's not really a major concern. as far as I'm concerned. But it is something to keep in mind. One other thing to note, though, is that because this is an automatic knife, this does not rely so much on low friction. This has a pretty powerful spring here that is driving the automatic action to it. So there's not really, it's not the case, and I can go ahead and remove and wipe this off as well. It's not the case that, this is relying on, super low friction, because the spring is going to power it through anyways. So they can really get away with a lot making automatics that they might not be able to if they were doing, say, a conventional flipper, like their new guy, the Cambria. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and continue wiping this guy off. You can see there is some residue that's built up just from the amount of time I've carried this prior to this disassembly. I have indeed carried it. It's a surprisingly nice little knife. The hidden mechanism is pretty neat. If you are a knife geek, you will understand it pretty quickly, but to everybody else, it seems pretty like, whoa, are you a wizard? No, I just use magic. Anyways, so there you go. Let's pop this guy loose. Pop this guy loose. Let's pop this guy unloose. Let's pop it tight. Pop it back in. Whatever. I'm going to go ahead and wipe off the spring too. Why not? I am going to go on ahead and use some 10-weight nano oil here. Just put a little bit inside here. That way the spring has something to glide against. Is that needed? No, probably not. Is it helpful? Maybe. I don't know. But, and I'll go ahead and drop the, I may end up having to reassemble this such that I put the spring down here and then, but we're going to give it a shot this way. I'm going to go ahead and put a little lubrication on the blade itself here. There is no detent ball path to lube or anything, so that's useful. And I am going to go ahead and also put some lubrication on the tang of the blade back here, because the backlock will ride along that. Again, this is not as crucial on an automatic, but it is something to keep in mind. Next step in disassembly, or reassembly that is going to be to pull the backlock up a little bit and then seat this little tongue on the spring into this little groove. And in order to do that, I have to have the blade at kind of an odd angle. So what I'll do is I'll seat the spring in there. I'll get the pivot in the middle there, and then I will use, there we go. Come on. There we go. I will use that spring and use the blade sort of as a lever to bend that spring, because that spring is what is giving us this spring tension that pops the knife open. The spring tension isn't super strong, which is actually something I appreciate. I mean, the knife fires very reliably with it, but, oh, damn it, I didn't lubricate the pivot hole. So I'm going to go ahead and I just used a little bit there, and I'm just going to try and rotate the pivot a little bit just to get that throughout there. But anyways, the spring is not like, oh my God, ridiculously strong, which means that this is, workable. You don't have to worry so much during the disassembly, reassembly process about that. You don't have to bend it 15 revolutions. They have a good sense of dialing these in. You can tell they've made a lot of autos. So there you go. Go ahead and lubricate this outer portion here. And now the knife is pretty much back to where it needs to be. One thing I am going to go ahead and do as well is I'm going to put a little bit of lubrication just along the bottom of this backlock spring, as well as on the side here, as well as back here. The reason I'm doing that is so that when this does move, and it will move against this portion, it'll move a little bit more smoothly. And that'll just, make the entire system run a little bit better. So, okay, there are no missing parts here yet, which is good. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the pivot back in. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead and use some blue Loctite, which is around here somewhere. Here we go. And I'm going to use this Loctite on a stick because it's been useful for me lately. As a reminder, if you're ever curious what I'm using in a disassembly, tool-wise, just go ahead and check out, I have a video on knife disassembly tools where I talk you through the entire toolkit, and I have links of where to buy these things. I'm going to just start off by tightening this down a little bit, and just get to the point where there's no play. There's no play. Beautiful. Next, I'm going to put in the back screws here. So I will switch heads on this to a bigger head, which doesn't make sense. Not that I need a bigger head than I've already got. Let's be real here. But let's pop this in. Again, the shorter one goes up top here. And there we go. Slide this in. Beautiful. 9 minutes in, and I'm already mostly done with an automatic knife disassembly. Nice. Can't argue with good construction. Protech is a company that's been impressing me lately, I gotta say. Like, their work is good. Okay, so those are both tightened. Beautiful. Now, what we're going to do is see where the action is at here. And the way I'm going to do that is because I can just kind of drop this piece on here, and that'll give me enough leverage to manipulate the back lock. Right now, what we can see is that the pivot is just way too tight. And so I need to back that off a little bit. So I'll switch over to my pivot driver. The reason I know that is because the blade is kind of bound up. It's just it doesn't want to move. And so let's back that off a little bit here. And let's see if that does the trick. What I'm looking for here is a blade tension that will allow the knife to reliably deploy, but has zero blade play. There it is. Actually, one thing to note is that this knife actually got quieter to deploy. Yeah, it seems to be there's a little less kind of crunching, if you will. It's not the term I'm after here, but there's a little less crunching. It seems like it moves a little bit smoother. Oh, actually, I need to put some Loctite on this screw, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Sure, if you don't want to come out, I'll bring the Loctite to you. Just a little bit there. Beautiful. Drop this onto here. I do like this system a lot. I think it's great because, you know, it's a simple thing. It is very, very simple. This doesn't rely on fancy lever. This is a backlock knife, and backlock knives are about as simple as they get, but they've added one spring and then this little part here, and suddenly they've created a really nice little automatic opening system with the strength of a backlock as well as, I mean, this is a really, really nice little knife. I gotta say that. Centering is absolutely dead on. Action is just great. Nicely done. No blade play. Can't argue with that. Alrighty, so there you go. Like magic, the magic has been disassembled and reassembled. I hope this was, tongue-tied. I hope this was interesting for you, that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.